But I think you're in for a real treat. Kyle is a great guide. He's a very knowledgeable fisherman. He is an excellent fly tyer. And you have a program for us. And you're going to do the program first or tie first? What do you want to do?
Whatever makes sense for you guys. I mean,
Well,
if we want to,
it's your show. However you want to work it.
yeah, I mean, I can get the presentation going and we can get that over with and we can.
Okay. And what is it about? Is it just an overview of black earth angling?
No, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of some high water tactics and kind of, over the past, 3-4 years now, we've had really, really wet years and at least up here. And there's just been a lot I've learned in those years and I want to share what I've learned. So.
Okay. Well, beyond his excellent fishing skills and his knowledge as an outdoorsman and a guide and a businessman, he's a fabulous photographer. So you guys are in for a treat tonight, Kyle, my dear friend. It is a pleasure. Kyle Zempel, guys.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark.
Hey, Kyle, just a moment. Can I ask everyone to please mute your mics while Kyle's giving his presentation?
And if you have questions, just put them on chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll leave some time for some questions towards the end too. So if you have a question, write it down so you don't forget it. Well, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Obviously, this is a little different circumstance than the last time I was with DRiFT. I'd much rather kind of be face to face with you all, but I mean, this is kind of the world we live in right now. So we'll make the best of it. I won't waste a whole lot of time with intros. Mark did a pretty good job of explaining who I am, and we've had a lot of good times together. I'll kind of go into my presentation a little bit here. Let me share my screen. Whoops. All right, can everyone see that? Give me a thumbs up. All right, great. So yeah, kind of the topic here is going to be high water smallmouth and toothy critters, meaning pike and muskie. We've had a lot of this last few years in my part of the world. As a guide who makes a living doing this, I don't get to pick and choose what days I get to be on the water. I kind of am out there no matter what the conditions are, obviously. There's been a number of days that have been canceled and rescheduled, but for the most part, after the rain leaves, it leaves behind a whole lot of water lately. So I have to learn how to kind of deal with all of this. So there's a few things I've learned and I'd like to kind of share with you guys. You might find interesting. Now, this will largely be focused on kind of my watershed, the Wisconsin River, but I think it's something you can apply to other rivers as well, at least some of it anyways. Yeah, I mean, it's becoming this thing that seems to be more and more common. In the state of Wisconsin, the water table is actually up quite a bit. So any rain that we do get has a different effect than it has when I first started guiding. And, some of the things I'm going to cover is kind of understanding your waterway, the floodplain, how clarity affects things. And then, talking about some of the key water flows that I like. And then a little bit about getting after it safely for those of you who have a boat and get out and get after it. And then some using some technology tips and tricks I use. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty about actually fishing in high water. But the first things first for me is understanding my waterway. And you can see on the right here that graph, and that was taken in 2019. Let's see, I think that's the 10th of August, actually. It's the date's a little different. But you can see how normally that time of year, there's that green line way at the bottom. That would be what I would almost consider a little bit above normal. That's kind of like where I like a certain launch is where that line is. And you can see how much higher. I mean, we're talking, 40 to 50,000 CFS is what I've been seeing, which is extreme amount of water. So the biggest thing is, how does this water affect the water, the floodplain? And I've definitely learned that there's sections that are much better than others, that are maybe more bottomland, and that water can go out versus up, in a channelized area. It's one of the key pieces I've learned, is that there are certain sections that definitely fish better under high water conditions. And then ultimately, how the tributaries affect that water flow, because you can take and look at your waterway, and if you get a bunch of rain, let's say you get 3 inches of rain where you fish, well, that rain is already moving downriver. The moment it falls, it's the rain that's upriver that you have to be paying attention to, and not only just the river that you're fishing, but also the tributaries of that. um, it's really important to understand, you know, do the, are there certain tributaries that dirty up the river? For example, on the Wisconsin River, upriver of Lake Wisconsin, there's the Baraboo River. The Baraboo River stretches a long ways. Um, and when we get a lot of rain, that Baraboo River goes through a lot of ag land, and it carries a lot of sediment with it. And there's certainly a window of time you have before that sediment kind of reaches the main river, the Wisconsin River, and starts to dirty it up. And then it takes a while to clear as well. And so I've been able to kind of time out by watching the graphs of the Bear River, like how long it takes to, number one, reach the Wisconsin River, but also clear out of the Wisconsin River. And when that sediment kind of starts to decline in the water itself, it's it's been a key piece to understanding where fishing windows are, right? So oftentimes we need to, if that heavy sediment's coming in from the Baraboo, we need to get above the Baraboo, for example, sometimes, or we need to, pick a different section of water that's further down that the sediment hasn't reached it yet. So it's really key to kind of pay attention to some of the tributaries of the rivers you're going to be fishing. And then, again, this kind of goes hand in hand. How long does that sediment last? It can be up to, I would say, about a week after the Baraboo stabilizes, that the sediment will start to fully clear out of there. It certainly is fishable, but going into the day understanding what you're going to be looking at water-wise and water condition-wise. So kind of your plan of attack changes from, maybe the white minnow white streamer that you normally use, to maybe something black or something that makes a little bit more noise, something that maybe has some rattles in it, because you're going to be dealing with a lot more sediment, and those fish can't see nearly as far. So this last one is, do sections fish better than others? I've also found that there's stretches of the Wisconsin River that have higher banks, and those tend to be more difficult fishing under high water conditions, because what happens is that water speed increases greatly, and there's less places for those fish to hide. Where some of those areas where it's more bottomland, that water, instead of going up, it spreads out into the forest, which allows fish to go out there, but you can still fish the main channel with some success. And also understanding, what sections maybe have more islands or more current breaks, or has a certain bend that'll play to your advantage during these high water situations. So the biggest thing is, like, you got to get out and get after it, is what I've learned. And this is us pulling our way through a forest, trying to find a tributary that we wanted to go explore. And the water was so high that we couldn't actually figure out where the tributary entered the river, because there was just so much water that it was all lost. So here we are, pulling our way through the forest, trying to find those those fishing areas. So some safety things. We want some PFDs in there: saw, rope, push pole. These things are all things I always have in my boat. We don't spend a ton of time on that stuff. But exploration, this is really, really where where I've really been able to break through on some things, and make some big breakthroughs as far as like spring pike go and a number of the summer smallmouth bites. Being able to explore a little bit is key. So a few things I use for this. Google Earth is definitely something that I would say if you're going out and exploring on your own, take a look at a Google Earth image and kind of find out, where are these areas that are going to flood over, where maybe some big flats that'll flood. Pike fishing in the spring is a big one. Where are these grassy fields that will flood, and that's where the pike will move into to spawn. These areas are, you're able to find them on Google Earth, which saves you some time while you're out on the water, just, kind of moving around. And then the water gauges. This has been really, really crucial to my day to day. It's understanding, I guess, where these gauges are. Number one, there's a great app I use called I think it's Riverflow is actually the name of it. I will just double check right now. And this thing is great if you're fishing around, or excuse me, Rivercast it's called. It's a free app, or if it is, they may charge for it, but it's not very much money. And it's super nice. It basically compiles all of these different gauges into one nice, tidy app that you can kind of click on. You can set your favorites. So, the rivers you fish often, or certain gauges that you need to watch to know where the water levels are at. These things are super, super good to be able to mark as your favorite. And I'm checking these things, more than anything else in my bag of tricks is checking these different gauges to make sure that the water is doing what I expect it to be doing. And then some technology things I've got some side imaging, and this stuff doesn't necessarily help me all that much in the main river where I'm familiar with, but it's when you start to explore some of these back river channels that maybe flood. These things are crucial to kind of help you know what's going on below you, and will really help you find some structure. Again, a lot of this stuff really comes in handy in the springtime when we have some high water. And having a nice tool for the craft is really helpful. This is my my new boat that I use. It gets me pretty much anywhere I want to go, and allows me to basically explore any back channel I want to. And it's a not everybody has this, so I understand that. And many of you maybe only wade fish, but we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But let's talk about catching them, because that's probably what you want to know the most about, right? First things first, we really need to understand their food sources. I think I've learned a few things over the last couple of years about their food sources that has helped me really find success. Water temperature is something that's super key. Water temperature greatly affects where the bait fish are located, and whether you're wading or you are in a boat with some sonar, most of those things will have a gauge on you. When I'm wading some of these areas of the Wisconsin, I really like to carry a thermometer with me and kind of temp out little shallow bays and stuff like that may have warmer water. It's usually obvious. You'll start to see bait fish swimming around your feet. But in the springtime, especially, 1 degree can be all the difference as far as where these bait fish are located. And obviously, if you find their food source, you're going to find those fish. So I'm more or less looking for their food source, not the fish itself. Current breaks. This is no, this is no big surprise. This kind of goes into a number of the, or this kind of goes right hand in hand with like the section of river. There's certain sections that have a lot of different islands that are a little higher off the water that can handle a lot more water, and they create these wonderful current breaks, which actually can make the fishing even better because those fish will congregate at these current breaks. So the biggest thing is where can we find relief from that heavy current? I think people make the mistake of not looking at the big picture. And again, this is where Google Earth can sometimes help you, is you can take a satellite imagery of the river itself, and sometimes these islands are big, and you if you're just on the river, you may miss actually what's happening on the big scale of things. Like sometimes you have to look at the big picture as where's this major current break happening? You know, where's the main current going and where's the relief from it? So finding these current breaks have led to some really, really nice toothy critter areas. They tend to be the first ones to be in these current breaks. And I find the better the current break, the better the predator. The bass will be there, but there'll also usually be a big toothy critter somewhere around. And when I find that big toothy critter or I find that big break, this is kind of the key for me to say that, okay, this is one of the major ones that I should really spend some time on. These have all come from high water situations where you find that nice major current break where a lot of the fish are congregated. I think if you switch tactics, you could probably start picking up walleye and kind of everything else that you'd find in the river. I think all the fish kind of move to these areas. They're just loaded full, but they're not always super obvious. And this is another thing, is like understanding at what water levels this ties directly in with the water gauges. At what levels do fish move in and move out? So this is Hannah. This is my partner. She's wading this flat, and in most situations in the summer, this is a sandbar. So you can see it's up to about her mid calf there. And when the water does come up into this flat, when it floods over the sandbar into these willows, the fish move in there like gangbusters, and it is like some of the greatest like top water kind of bass chasing minnows spot in all of the river. And it's really nice because we can take the boat there, we get out, it's like it's a flat sandbar underneath, so it's super nice wading. You can get out and actually sneak up to these fish because you have to approach them quietly. And so here's the main current. You can see there, it's that blue dotted line, and it kind of sweeps around this little point. And we're going to just start working our way tight and start moving our way out, working kind of from the current back to us with some sort of, whether it's a streamer or top water. But this is a key thing I learned, is that there's certainly like certain levels, and I've started to make notes on these. Okay, at this, at 16,000 CFS, the water comes up over this ledge and those fish move into there. And, I'll go back and kind of check on these spots that I have notes on. And sometimes there's no correlation. Other times it's like every time the water gets to this level, those fish will be there. So it's helped me kind of find success throughout, the course of the season, no matter what the condition. And then also, like, has this high water created new current breaks? Because again, this is an area where it's normally all sand. There's no water where these guys are standing, but this whole area floods and becomes this backwater bay. That's a great large area for bait fish to kind of move out of that heavy current. The water's warmer. The bait fish they'll be everywhere. And actually, while you're standing here waiting, the bait fish are chewing on your leg hair. It's kind of it's a funny thing. There's so many bait fish in there. And this is kind of the key spot right here. The main current is just on that far left side. And it's definitely helped to always be on the lookout, because some of these areas, like you're on the river all the time. You see these areas that are normally sandbars and suddenly there's water over them, and you wouldn't think anything would be there, but suddenly you see fish blowing up on it. And, I kind of, if you fish with me, you notice I kind of always have my head on a swivel when I'm driving. And a lot of people, I don't know if they get the wrong idea that I'm not paying attention to what they're saying, but I'm usually very keyed into what's going on around me, because a lot of what happens on this river is visual and you can see it. And so I'm always got my eyes on unlikely looking spots. So here again, current was coming through. This has been a spot I never had seen fish before, but I remember what was underneath the water here. And this was it was like a 2-step sandbar, where this is actually one of the most popular places people camped. And because the water came up, obviously no one was camping there. And it created this little bit of a trough right here. And it made like the perfect storm for these bass. They were able to push bait up into where that guy on the right is and get the bait trapped in there. And it was just mayhem. Again, a place I had never thought that I'd ever see fish. But because I was driving by and saw this commotion, we were able to stop it and capitalize on it. Side channels and tributaries. This is really important for, especially for guys who wade. If you fish an area where you have some braids and stuff like that, they may in the summertime dry up or be real low water. Pay attention to these when the water goes up, because a lot of times the main channel becomes pretty dicey to wade. However, these side channels can be perfect wading with, you know, a nice light current, because it's just enough to kind of flood these channels. There's a lot of bugs and stuff that like live in these you know, dried up creek channels, and when it floods, you know, all that food gets put in the water, and the bait fish will start to move in to feed on things, and you know, the bass and other predator fish will follow. I always like to focus on the outflow first, before I kind of start looking around at other places. The outflow seems to be where most fish like to concentrate. This again, main current's going this way, and this is the side channel, a slight current coming in. And I think what ends up happening is those bait fish are seeking, you know, safety from the heavy current by going into something a little more moderate. And the predator fish will kind of be in that heavier current or just tucked in where they can, hoping that these bait fish make the mistake of getting pushed out into the main current, which like a lot of times I think what it does is it stirs them up, breaks up their schools, and that's when they're easily able to get eaten. So they tend to use that heavy current, I think, to their advantage. Another situation. This is the outflow of a flooded backwater. Main current's the red line. It's coming. You know, we're kind of anchored in the main current, and there's a side current coming in here. As you can see, he's already hooked into a fish here. You can see how dirty the water is. I mean, this is super, super heavy water. And I mean, this is normally, you know, this is tall grass, and there's usually a bank, and then there's water. And so that tall grass, is, you can see it is almost, you know, halfway underwater at least. So this seemed to be the area they were just kind of waiting, and I think they were waiting for baitfish to move out of that heavy current to come into this you know, refuge, and they would just crush them as soon as they did. And then I found that the toothy critters, they generally will tuck somewhere in between the two main currents where there is the stillest spot. In the fall, the best way to notice this spot is that there's usually collected leaves. You know, it's everywhere else will kind of have leaves moving, but there'll be one spot where there's like a collection of leaves, and that's generally a spot where a toothy critter likes to hang out because the water's still, or there's something that draws everything to that one spot. So it's something to pay attention to. But one thing I've learned, again, is don't neglect the inflow. This is a funny little story. These guys, first time ever fly fishing, you know, they wanted to go out. It was a super windy day. I told them, and we had super high water. I'm like, guys, it's going to be a tough day. Like, we don't care. We just want to get out. You know, so we started fishing, and they were just getting eaten up by the wind. And I decided that, okay, we need to take a break because we're getting nowhere, and this wind is out of control. Let's go hike up Ferry Bluff. So we pulled the boat over. They were thrilled to get out of the boat and take a break, and we hiked up here. And while we were up here, I noticed a bunch of splashing right around in this area. And I thought I had seen something, and I'm like, nah. And so I stopped, and I had him watch with me. And all of a sudden, sure enough, we saw it again. And I'm like, holy smokes, like, we just spotted bass on top of this bluff. And so we went down and drove over there. And sure enough, they were just congregated on this inflow of this, of that side channel that's across the river. This is another one of those inflows. I haven't quite figured out what exactly it is about the inflows, but it seems to be if the fish are there, they're in high numbers, and are there basically until that inflow gets cut off. So again, here, the red line is the main current. This is a offshoot channel. This is the inflow of it. I had fished the hell out of the outflow of this side channel because it looks really good. But had no luck. And one day I'm like, well, I'm just going to float from the top down and see if there's maybe something I'm missing in here. And we hooked up with like 2 bass right away at the start of the inflow, and then realized that they were just all congregated right here. And so I've kind of thought to myself, well, maybe there's bait fish moving out of the heavy current into this system where the current's a little bit more moderate, and the bass are just waiting for that opportunity for when these schools of bait fish will move in to devour them. Again, something I'm still working on, but it has certainly become a thing. Flooded vegetation. This thing is should be kind of obvious, right? It provides cover for the bait fish. It provides cover for the predator fish. There's lots of things that get put in the water system when something floods. You think about all the different critters that live in these willows and whatnot, and then all of a sudden the water comes up, and all these things become submerged in water. The bait fish go in there to feed, and the predators will follow. And then this is, kind of specifically where the areas are we spoke of earlier, those side channels, those current breaks. If there's flooded willows in those areas or flooded vegetation, that's a real good sign. And this one is probably my favorite, the flooded grass. This thing is really key. And this goes back to understanding your food source. I think, especially in the summer months when we start to have some frogs around, as soon as that grass floods, the frogs become so much closer to the water, and oftentimes their main habitat is now much closer to where those bass can get at them. I think they're in the water a lot more when that grass gets flooded, and it's just a really, really good place to fish a frog. I don't think this video will play, but I'll send it your way afterwards. I normally play a little video here. I had trouble playing it before, so I'm just going to skip it for now. But we'll get right into some tactics here. So one of the key pieces with flooded vegetation, I've switched over to real heavy leaders during high water, especially when we're fishing this flooded stuff. I'm finding that those fish are in that flooded vegetation. And, if you look in there and you can see that there's bait fish in there, like those predators want to be in there. There's food sources in there. So what I've done is just beefed up my leader to, 20, 30 pounds so that I can work stuff through there and still be able to get my fly out. And then, with that, considering, some sort of weedless or like a bend back style hook, something that normally would use for like mangroves, where you can cast it in there and it's going to come out a little easier than let's just say your traditional streamer. It's a great place for topwater and weightless flies. And the reason I say that is not only the ease of removal, but when you throw a popper in there, as long as it's like a foam popper, not a big heavy wood one, as soon as it hits, if you make a bad cast and it goes into the willows, it's lightweight. It's going to hit the willows and it's usually going to stop, and it's not going to continue with momentum and wrap like something with dumbbellized wood or something with weight. So a lot of times if you made a bad cast, because sometimes you're trying to hit a tiny little window, and these areas you can pick up again right out of the willows and put it right back in there without it wrapping and getting you all tangled up, making for a headache and a lot of lost flies. So a lot of times when I'm finding fish rooting around in this vegetation, I really like to use just like really lightweighted flies that aren't going to carry momentum if they hit something. And oftentimes like a popper that you would use for largemouth, like something with a weed guard on it, is really nice. And you can kind of work your way through and pop up and over different flooded willows, and allows you to kind of work through some of that stuff. We had a situation a number of years ago where you could hear it was like snooker tarpon when they were in the mangroves. You could hear them like snapping and rooting around in there, and I had a hard time believing that there was actually bass. I thought maybe it was suckers or some sort of carp that was in there working around, but upon further inspection, it was certainly at least a number of those fish were bass in there. And the only way to get at them was, kind of get out and just get on foot and walk the edges and just kind of like almost like you were dapping into these willows. And we were just picking them off left and right, and it was so much fun. But as soon as you like kind of made a big commotion, you could see all the fish would zoom out of there. So you really had to be quiet and walk like a heron while you're sneaking along there. And I kind of used all those tactics above there. We had heavy leaders with topwater flies, and we were just kind of sneaking along, looking for any sort of commotion in the water and just kind of hitting little pockets where we could. And they were just stacked. It was super fun. And so get close. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes I see some folks make is, and obviously like every situation is different. But in general, I find that kind of the more line you have out there, the more drag you're going to have on that line, which makes it harder to make a good presentation. So I try to, like, when I'm floating people down a bank and, let's say we are fishing a section of bank that I like during high water, I generally have the boat relatively close so that we can get in there and the fly has time to get down, and you can stay in touch with that fly without it being dragged away right away by the heavy current. A lot of times we're fishing those current breaks and the boat's floating in the main heavy current. I'll try to get as tight as I can to those current breaks so that they can kind of keep their rod tip high so that their line does not grab that heavy current and get swept out of there. So again, if you're waiting, this goes true a lot of times when I'm trout fishing as well. I want that angler close enough where they can keep their rod tip up so that the fly line is not dragging on the heavy current, because that heavy current right away is going to start sweeping you out, and you're going to get a big bow in your line, and you're not going to be in touch with that fly at all. So get close and be in touch with that fly. And waiting in high water can be really effective if you're familiar with the waterway and kind of know what's down there. Like I said, some of these places have hardly any water in, and then when it maybe floods a foot, you're dealing with maybe 1.5 feet of water, which is definitely wadeable. I always obviously proceed with caution and know your waterway. But on the lower during high water is one of my favorite times to actually wade, because a lot of these areas that are normally sand or inches of water that nothing lives in suddenly become like the main places to find the fish. And getting out of the boat is sometimes the best way to get at it. And it's certainly worth your time. Again, if you know the places, again, these side channels are really, really key. When water goes up, I think in almost any river I've ever fished, when you get that high water and those side channels start to get flooded and more food sources are in those, it's worth going down them and seeing what's in there. So this is a prime example of getting out and waiting. So here's the heavy current. It's coming in and meeting a little bit more moderate current. And the way to position my boat here was really difficult, and to get a good presentation was really difficult, because the fish were working right here. They were literally working right on that point of the confluence of them. It had a bit of a weird back eddy going on the inside, and like there was just no good way to approach it from the boat. And the best way we found is just get out of the boat, get on that point, and cast your line almost right over the sand, right to where those fish were, and make it move from there. And that was the key piece. And most certainly, I think, hot spotting is something I have learned to do a lot more of. I think you have your favorite banks on rivers that you may float, or, you may wade, and it's just like, under normal conditions, we're always catching fish here. I'm going to fish it. And when the water goes up, suddenly that's just not happening anymore. But you still want to just beat that drum. I've learned that I need to give some of that stuff up, and some of those banks aren't worth fishing in high water, and maybe just focusing more on those hot areas where the fish are and spending more time there. Because again, I think in that high water situation, those fish are congregating a lot more than they are when they're dispersed and the water levels are all, at their normal place. The congregation of fish is kind of one of the key things, I think. And I think this goes for most rivers. When when there is that high water, those fish do not want to be in it, and they want to be kind of in those current breaks or those like key areas. I think focusing on that more so than trying to cover a lot of water is the key. It can be great fun, of course. As I said, I've had some really, really good times. And the funny thing is, when that water goes up, I'm usually the only boat at the launch. Everybody you talk to is like, "What are you going out there for?" You know, like you're not going to catch anything. And you know, I think the common consensus on the river is that in high water you're not going to catch anything. Um, but unless you are out there exploring and you kind of learn that that's not always the case, you kind of have the river to yourself. I think 2019, I think I had most of the month. We had like high water all of June, and I think I had the river almost to myself every day for the month of June. It was pretty fantastic, and the fishing was really, really good once you figure it out. But you can't figure it out unless you go out there in those conditions that may not be your favorite or your most comfortable. So you got to kind of get out of that comfort zone a little bit. So some of the things I use here, weighted lines. I don't really like using weighted lines a lot in heavier current. The fly line, that thickness of the line tends to just create a lot of drag. So I find them most effective in slower, moderate currents. And you know, it is good for helping keep that fly down. But if I'm really trying to get something down to the bottom, I really kind of avoid using like a sink tip line. I really like them for, you know, large kind of those backwater areas or those really nice current breaks. And I oftentimes like an unweighted fly. You certainly can use a weighted fly, but you know, if I can get away with it, I'm going to use an unweighted fly with no more than a 3-foot leader. I think that's the one mistake I see a lot of anglers make is that they put a sink tip on and they have like a 9-foot leader, and it really just kind of works against itself. Obviously, there's situations where maybe you're running a floating fly and you want it to dive down in the water. That's a different situation. But when we're trying to get our fly down, we want that fly close to that weighted line. That's our point of sinking, and the closer we are to it, the more it's going to affect your sink rate. Are you guys able to see me? Okay, yeah. All right. So, you know, most of you may understand this, but it's probably the most common mistake I see. So obviously, like here's your sink tip, right? And here's your fly. So if I'm sinking like this, it's going to start to pull the fly down, right? And if I have 9 feet here, this is going to sink, and there's not going to be a whole lot happening with that fly for a long time. So, you know, by the time you know your fly line gets down and you think you're in the spot, that fly is not anywhere near where it needs to be down towards the bottom. So big thing there, get that fly near to that sink tip. And then we'll get into weighted flies. I really like a Clouser minnow. I think it's, you know, there's been plenty of, you know, Bob Clouser's coming, which is great. I use it. I think it's probably the most utilized fly in my box. It sinks super fast. I don't know of really many flies that sink faster than a Clouser minnow. It gets down right away. There's not a lot of resistance when it's going down. There's not a lot of bulk to it, so it just falls and plummets really nicely. So I usually am using that in heavy water, and then I'm using a long fluoro leader. I don't generally use fluoro all the time. But in high water situations, I'll basically go like straight 16 pound. It doesn't make for beautiful casting, but it works. And I'll go like, 9 to 14 feet of just straight fluorocarbon to a Clouser minnow. And just remember, the thicker that leader is, the more drag it's going to have. And we don't want there to be a whole lot of drag if we want something to get down quickly. And again, if you're going to be using a fly and you want it to get down quickly, don't use something with a lot of bulk. Something that's like very streamlined, bucktails, SF fibers, things that aren't going to like grab a whole lot of water and slow you down. Anything with rubber legs is not going to fall that fast because the legs create resistance as it falls. Those are great in some situations, but not if you really want to get down right away. And don't neglect using a bobber, right? I know it's like, it's got to be a pretty serious situation for me to put an indicator on to fish for bass, but I have found myself in that position and I have found success doing it. It helps allow you to throw some mends in there and detect a bite while you're letting that fly kind of sink down. It can be useful, and it may not be always the most glamorous type of fishing, but it certainly does have its place. And we'll get into topwater flies here. They can be really deadly. I think, again, something, if the water is really chocolatey, something that makes noise and disturbance is good. Again, you want to think when water is coming up, it's flooding people's lawns, it's flooding willows, it's flooding places where mice might be living, the long grasses. These things end up in the water, and they, are going to swim for dear life to get away. Same thing with frogs, right? So something that makes a little disturbance on the surface. Don't be afraid to put rattles in them, make a little extra noise. And I find that you need to change your pace a little bit when you are fishing maybe stained water. Slow it down, because that fish can't see it always. So they're going to hear it. It's going to draw their attention. They need to move and locate. And if you don't leave it there long enough, a lot of times you may have a fish follow or something like that, but that fish won't have time to find it. So slow down your approach on a top water in dirty water. Pop it, let it sit a little extra long, pop it again, like give them ample time if you can to find it. Because a lot of times they will, they're aggressive and they need to eat. So, this is especially important if you have sunken, logs or some vegetation that is down there. That's a great time to just let it marinate right over the top of that stuff. And again, like I said, noise. Don't be afraid to use maybe a size up on the popper head in that dirty water. So, some words of wisdom here. Location is most important, right? Understanding your watershed, knowing where those key places are to be, and where to, find those areas that fish best under high water. Experiment and explore. If you're not out there, you'll never know if the fishing is good in high water. And if you think there's fish there, keep at it. Sometimes it takes a little extra work to figure them out, change weights, change things up. Again, if you think there's fish there, it's a really good looking spot for high water, keep at it. You'll eventually, hopefully, crack the code. Sometimes it's just a matter of changing a few things up. Casting positions can make all the difference. This is, again, getting close. Maybe instead of casting upstream at it, maybe try a downstream approach, change those things up. Or just go trout fishing if the water's real high. So, luckily we live in I live in the driftless area, and I have a lot of options at my disposal here. So sometimes, let's say the river goes up and it's going to be up for a number of days. Sometimes the next best option is to go check out the spring creeks. So, lastly, fish must eat. So get after them. They're out there. You can catch them. And I think that's all I have for the presentation here. Let's see. I will. I'll tie up the fly I was going to tie today. It's the Snowcone Bass Streamer. It's a streamer that I kind of came up with a year or two ago now, and it's been really effective for me. I've made a few alterations to it. I do a video out there on YouTube or something where I tie it. I have made a little alteration from that, just from trial and error. But it's a highly customizable fly, as I mentioned in the in the text I sent over. You can kind of make it in any sort of color scheme you like. Again, it's the head is a craft fur brush, and if you have ever looked at a fly shop and the number of different color combinations, it's dizzying how many different color combos you want. So you should be able to kind of find a color that fits you. I'm going to do kind of just a classic, shad or shiner color. It's going to be mostly silver and gray, some white, and I'll kind of tie along. Let's see if I can switch this over real quick.
Kyle, can I ask you one question, please? I watched your video and I've seen you tie this fly before.
Mhm.
I assume you're doing the one with no weight, but you say this fly is weightable. If you do choose to weight it, where do you put the weight? Do you use a bead or do you weight the hook shank?
I'm actually going to weight this one. Yep.
Oh, you are? Okay, well,
Yep.
my dreams have come true.
Yeah, definitely. It works just fine unweighted. But I realize that in most people's situations, they want something that's going to get down a little bit. I know I fish a lot towards the surface, and so that originally was designed to kind of run just under the surface, which is why I didn't weight it, and the hook weight was just enough for me. But I think as a general purpose fly, I think adding weight to is a good idea. So.
Cool. Thank you.
You bet. Let's see. All right. Can you guys still hear me? So I am using a Gamakatsu B10S. It's a 1/0 stinger hook. It doesn't necessarily have to be this one. This is just the one I really like and I tie on. I think you can probably tie this on a different size if you wanted to, something smaller or bigger. 1/0's kind of one of my favorite size hooks. It's got a good gape and works pretty well. For weight, I'm gonna put a 0.035. And again, you can kind of weight this to your specific situation. I find about 8 to 10 wraps is probably just about right. And when I weight that, I want to weight it pretty center because I don't want this thing to necessarily nosedive. I want it to kind of be evenly weighted. So I'm going to get our thread started here. And I'm just going to skewer that weight in a little bit so it's not spinning around on me. We're just going to bring that thread back to about the point of the hook. Get rid of our tag there. And so this, you could substitute bucktail here if you don't have, like a slinky fiber. This is a synthetic fiber. I like it because it sheds water and doesn't hold water. So it keeps the fly nice and light. But again, it's kind of acts as an anti-foul guard and a little bit of a keel for the fly. Like I said, you could use bucktail here if you wanted to, but you are just going to bring out about a half a pencil And so I have this here. I'm just going to find the middle of it. And I'm just going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to snip this here in half to double that up. Now, I generally don't like this kind of clean cut end, so I'll just kind of card it out a little bit and just kind of pull on the ends to make sure that they're not just a nice clean cut. I like something that's tapered. So we look something more like that on both ends. We are going to lash that down right in the middle, making sure we hold nice and tight so it doesn't spin around the hook. We're going to wrap forward, nice tight wraps. And then we're going to take it and fold it back and tie over the top of that and lock that in real nice so it can't slide out. All right. Good. Now, if you want, you can hit it with a little glue here. I'm going to skip that for now. And we are going to take our Flashabou here. Really, any color Flashabou will do. I just try to keep with the color scheme that I'm using. So I'm going to this is going to be kind of a silvery bait fish. So I'm going to use some silver Flashabou. I think I maybe mentioned Mirage. I like to use that one a lot because I find that it kind of just takes on whatever color you're tying with. So it's a good all-around Flashabou, I think. We don't need a lot here, probably 5-6 strands. We're going to double this back over itself. So again, we are going to tie that right in the middle. Right on top of your tail. And just lash that in there. Just add a little flash out the back. It's a little bright, but you should get the idea. Next, we are going to work with our polar chenille. So I'm using you can read that backwards. Silver UV. Again, all this stuff is somewhat interchangeable for the color fly you're tying. Probably make a small adjustment here so you guys can see the back of this fly. There we go. That's a little better. So I'm just gonna take and I'm just gonna snip myself a little area here to tie in. And if you look, there's sometimes you can kind of tell the direction in which this stuff wants to go. It's hard to tell with this stuff because it's been all kind of crumpled up in the bag, but I think we're doing it the right way, where it'll lay down real nice. And we are just going to tie this in. Nice tight securing wraps. Just going to kind of fill in that gap a little bit there between the weight and my tie-in point on the tail, just to even things out a little bit. And we're just going to work that thread up to the top of the weight. And we're just going to begin palmering this forward. It's important here that each time we wrap, we sweep back with our fingertips to free any fibers that are trapped and also keep from wrapping any under. We're just going to wrap forward, touching wraps. Don't necessarily need to overlap, just make sure they're touching. Get to the top of the weight. And we're going to just secure that in there. And snip that free. I like to just hold this back and just make sure I clean this up a little bit. This is a kind of a key point. If this comes loose, the fly will kind of come unraveled. So I like to kind of make sure that I got a nice tie-in point there. So this is where we're at right now. It's a little bright, isn't it? Maybe that's a little better. But you probably could fish it just like that, and it would catch just plenty of fish. So one thing I did add from the video that you may have seen online is I put in some ripple ice fiber. I don't know if this stuff was actually available when I first tied this fly. It's a new material. It's kind of stiff, which I like, and the crinkliness of it really looks nice in the water. So I'm going to add some in here. It's going to add a little support for that craft fur. So I'm going to take a decent pinch here. So about yay much here. And I just kind of want to like pull any of those super long ones and restack them so I don't lose too many of them when I go to tie this in. And we're just going to put that at the halfway point, right on top of the hook. I'm just going to put one wrap on there, just to hold that stuff in place. And then I want to kind of use my thumb, and I'm going to move that ripple fiber so it kind of starts to wrap around the top of the hook. Just like that. And then we can bring a second wrap in, just kind of hold things in place. Then I'm going to take what's out here in front, and I'm going to fold that underneath to kind of make up the bottom of the fly. Just going to hold my thread out of the way, grab everything and pull it back. And again, one wrap and same sort of deal. It's nice to have a rotary vise here, but you're going to do the same thing on the bottom where you kind of sweep all that stuff back, make sure it spreads evenly around the fly. And then sweep everything back nicely and give some good securing wraps here, wrapping backwards. Okay. So again, up until this point, everything here is synthetic. And so it sheds water really nicely and remains kind of lightweight when you're casting it. Okay, next, our craft fur brush. I believe this one is maybe like a minnow gray. I think I had written white down, but I realized once I wrote that I was out of white apparently. So minnow gray we will have. This is craft fur. I think it's 3-inch long. I know a number of people started making their own brushes. Most of the time, their brushes will probably turn out even better than this. And something with some longer fibers is key here. You don't want something with super short fibers because you want everything to kind of blend together and veil over this ripple ice fiber. So we have this nice little wire tie-in point here. We're just going to lay that on. I'm actually going to snip that down a little bit just because it's a little long. Using the back of my scissors so I don't dull them. Snip that off. And we're just going to tie that in place. Wrap, nice tight wraps forward. We're going to wrap that all the way up to the eye of the hook. Okay, and now we're just going to palmer this forward. This will help build like a nice kind of nice head on this thing and push a little bit of water. So it's okay to get quite a few wraps in here. We're trying to build up a head. And again, just like we did with the Polish chenille, we're gonna brush back. It's gonna look a little funny at first until we get to brush it all out. But again, I'm looking for touching wraps here. Again, it's going to look a little funky here until we get to brush it out, but I assure you it comes out all right. One thing I should mention too, as I'm coming up to make my wrap over, it's a nice spot to just take and you can just kind of brush those fibers back towards the back of the hook. I think I can squeeze one more in there without crowding everything up too much. Okay, and then we're just going to tie that off. Kind of move those fibers a little bit just so we can get a clean pass through with our thread. Good. 3 good hard wraps. We're going to sweep everything back, securing wrapper 2 in front, and then we're going to snip that clean. Okay. And at this point, I just kind of like to, you can sometimes feel that wire in there. I can feel it right here where my thumb is. I kind of just push that back and make sure I wrap over the top of that. It kind of helps lock everything in nicely. I'm just going to wrap our way back to make sure everything's nice and locked in there. Give ourselves a little bit of room for a whip finish. Find the right tool here. It looks like just kind of a hairy mess right now, but it'll come to life. All right, we're just going to whip finish. And I will hit this with some adhesive to make sure that it doesn't come undone, but I want to brush it out first. And if you put your adhesive on first, a lot of times you brush that glue into the fibers, which doesn't really help you. So at this point, you just want to get yourself a dubbing brush of sorts. And you're just going to start brushing that head out forward and backwards. And kind of blend all those fibers together nicely. Light's just a little bright. You can see there, creates a really nice profile. It's just a little blown out because it's a light color. My light's maybe a little too bright. There we go. It's a little bit better. And all we're going to do is just jazz it up with some eyes. Again, when you're happy when it's all brushed out and looks good, sweep everything back. And I usually use a little Loctite gel control, which I realize is not sitting in front of me here. There it is. Just gonna find a little spot there. Drop a dab on. Good, and then generally I like to take a little UV fly cure, just put just a small dot on the pupil of the eye, and then use my bodkin to work it in, so that it kind of keeps it locked into that fiber a little bit better. Just help your eyes last a little longer. Same thing to the other side.
So Kyle, you don't make a mask on this fly, you just glue the eyes to the hair?
Correct.
Okay.
You certainly could make a mask. I generally don't. I didn't want it to like necessarily dive. And I think when you add a mask on there, that'll tend to make it dive a bit. It does look kind of wild and hairy on here, but when it gets in the water, of course, it looks really nice. It holds a pretty good profile.
Some of your other color schemes or color patterns that you use?
Use a chartreuse and white. Use a black, and it's kind of like a midnight color. It's like a black, blue, purpley color for dirty water. And let's see, I do white, this gray one. I do a chartreuse and pink, and do a fire tiger one. So I mean, honestly, once you start looking at the number of different craft fur brushes, you know, it's your possibilities are just about endless. I'm just gonna snip this tail at an angle.
And you like the size 1 typically is pretty much the size you use a lot?
Yeah, well, sorry. Yeah, this is a pretty good size here. You can see it's got a nice chubby profile. It's a, like I said, you can tie it probably a little on the smaller side if you wanted to. This tends to be just about the size I'm looking for. Shows up well in the water. And again, if you look at it head on, you can see it's got a pretty good profile, and usually holds it pretty good in that water. I think adding that ripple ice fiber in there was kind of key to helping give some support behind the craft fur. But yeah, that's it. If we have time, I can just whip up another fly that I really like that I thought of after the fact that we had talked. It's up to you guys. I don't know where we're at on time, but
I'm not going anywhere. So if anybody wants to stick around, I mean, if guys have to go, they can go. I mean, sure, I'd love to see one.
yeah, and you guys can certainly ask me some questions here. I don't know if you guys.
I have one personal question I'd like to ask. I mean, obviously, because of the time of year I'm coming up, do you have a favorite topwater frog pattern that you fish other than a Dahlberg diver?
Well, you'll be happy to see this next fly here.
Oh, well, I guess
that's kind of why I'm tying it.
I'll just mute my mic and sit here and smile.
Yeah, so Mark's coming up for an event. I guess it'd be my newest camp, called Frogs and Footballs. This has been years in the making, and I finally kind of feel confident enough in kind of the time of year and my knowledge of the whole thing. But what happens is that there's a time of year and a section of water, and I don't know what exactly this section of what makes it so special, but what happens is basically a frog migration of kind of like biblical proportions. It's at night, it's kind of gross. Like you'll be stepping on frogs walking through the grass, like at the lawn, and you got to watch so they don't get in the house. And I mean, they're everywhere. And I was able to find some lodging in this section of water and run basically like it's a 2-day package camp, you know, kind of all food included, that sort of thing. And the goal is to be there for this whole frog migration. And the fish really key into these frogs to the point where you can almost see them sometimes tracking the frog through the air to hit it as soon as it hits the water. It's as fun as the crash to me. It's just slightly different, not as fast paced, more of your classic popper, but there's just nothing better than watching fish eat frogs. And one of the really neat things I find is that you'll be floating along the bank and there's just so many frogs they're just around. Like you can see them hopping along the sand and the banks, and all of a sudden you'll look down river and there'll be all this splashing, and it'll be a smallmouth trying to eat the frog off the sand. Like they're like orcas eating seals. It's incredible. I think just because there's so many frogs, they really key into the whole thing, and really have their eyes out for them. So yeah, hopefully Mark can report back a good report for you guys.
That's my dream. Now, what is that? That looks like a B10S.
Yes, it's a B10S. This actually, I'm out of size 1. I think that's probably the ideal size. But this fly is the stealth bomber. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's kind of an older fly, I would say, but it's a fast, nice, easy fly to tie. You can, the tail, I want to get a little creative here and make the tail so it looks more like a frog, but I've made this to look somewhat like a baitfish pattern as well, because it's kind of like a diver. I'm
Pay
just gonna,
attention, Bob. This is for us.
yep. And so all I'm going to do here is just bring in a couple, frog colored hackles here, about the length of a frog leg. I'm going to tie them bowing outward away from the hook, so they look like legs. Lash those babies on there. And now this is the shape of the foam. It is about 3 inches in length. And this is a punch that I use, but you certainly don't need the punch. You can literally just cut a long, like a strip about maybe a little bit more than a 1/4 inch wide, and then just make a triangle towards the end.
So
just kind of.
You don't buy those pre-cut, then that's just something that you do almost like your crease flies, same
Yeah,
cut.
I have an actual punch that I use.
Okay.
But you can literally just cut a straight line, and then at the end just cut it out to a triangle.
And what is that, 2 mil?
Yeah, it's 2 mil. Yep. But this is the general shape we're looking for, and again, it's probably about 3 inches long. And again, I was turned on to this fly by a client of mine. His dad had always used them growing up, and I had never seen one before. And I was kind of, they kind of look stupid, and like many, just great flies do. And I was kind of skeptical about the whole thing, because I'm like, well, we kind of use crease flies here and this and that, and boy, he certainly showed me that there's other flies to be had for topwater. It's just versatile. It can dive really nicely, and you'll kind of get the idea once I tie it. So we're going to tie. We want to measure it so that where it starts to taper out at the top is right about at the eye of the hook, and we're just going to tie that one in right on top of the hook. Want to make sure everything kind of stays nice and straight on top. Some securing wraps on both sides just to lock that foam in. And then I'm just going to leave it tucked back like that for now. The frogs generally have a white belly. You could use anything. You could put some dubbing here. You could kind of use whatever you wanted. I'm just going to use just some basic white chenille.
What color do your frogs have?
What's that?
What color do your frogs have, bellies?
White.
Okay, so white belly frogs. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And I think what they are, so I've been in contact with the Wisconsin herpetology department, because I've really wanted to figure this out, like why suddenly there's all these frogs. So we don't know exactly which ones they are because they don't have a solid picture of them, but to our best of knowledge, we think they're young leopard frogs, and what they're doing is there's some wetland and stuff across the way, like in the forest, and in those frogs are reaching adult or adolescent size where they've lost their tail and they're now migrating to their main water source. And so I think they're coming from this area and they're traveling to the main river to where they're going to live and winter over. And so I think they're young leopard frogs. So like a green, they're generally, most of them are like kind of 3 inches in length or short or smaller. And they're either like a darker green or like a brown. But we've used lots of green frogs and they work just fine. So we're just going to tie that chenille in and we're just palmering this forward just to add some underbody. Nothing special here. And again, when you really get these things cranking, you can really put a number of them out quickly. And we're just going to secure that chenille in. And
Is that crystal chenille or just regular chenille?
it's like white pearl. Yeah, it's called New Age chenille is what it says on my bag here. This is just anything white's fine, I think. I don't think it really matters. Just some sort of short. I didn't want anything super long. So just a short fibered chenille is just fine, I think.
Does it have a little sparkle to it or?
Yeah, it does. Yep. It's like kind of that cactusy color, cactus pearl chenille. And now we're just going to hold this nice and tight on top. Again, this tie down point should be right about where it starts to taper outward. We're just going to get a couple tie downs there. And again, glue is probably not necessary if you tie a few of them, but I do like to add a little glue right here. This is just Sally Hands and hard as nails. It's the only stuff I got laying around. And now we're going to take this back piece here and we're going to fold it. And if you did it right, there should be a loop like this. I'm going to tie it right, kind of just enough so I have enough to tie onto. Right? I don't want to tie back here. I want to tie kind of right up to the edge. I'm going to put that, and it's going to be the same tie down point we just made. Just going to hold that in place. Give some good securing wraps there. So this is kind of where we're at. Right? You want this cavity in here. Now we're just going to take this. This gets folded back. And this is kind of key that everything kind of stays nice and lined up here and you don't get it kind of off center. But you're just going to hold that in place and bring some loose wraps at first just to kind of get things settled in. And then we're going to increase pressure as we wrap. And I'll probably do like 5 wraps, 6 wraps or so. So basically here we are at this point here. Okay, now, if you wanted to make this into like a diving little minnow pattern, I would leave it just as is and whip finish it. I make these in white for bait fish and I use more bait fishy looking colors. But I'm going to add a little bit of some rubber legs because we're trying to make a frog here. So just some flutter legs. I'm going to use just 2 legs here. Maybe. And it's kind of a neat little way to tie legs in on this one is you just hold it on the far side. And then you can see it's just holding in place there with that first wrap of thread. Without cutting or anything, you can just bring it to the other side. And let your bobbin fall and hold that one in place. You want those to be about the same length at the front there. And then I just put a couple more wraps, probably two more wraps there. You want to try to keep all these wraps kind of on top of each other. Wish it wasn't so blown out, you could see. But all my wraps are right in the same spot there. Okay, just going to fold all the legs back and bring my thread forward, the eye of the hook. Build up a little bit of a thread dam here, just to kind of help everything hold in place. And we're just going to whip finish that. And for those of you who have the attention to detail, you're probably cringing at the fact that I'm using white thread on a green body, but I didn't want to take the time to switch threads while I have you here. Normally I would match the thread. Just gonna give a whip finish. Oh, cut that thread. Now we got this loop here. We can just cut that right in the middle. And we kind of got this buggy looking thing here. What I really like about this thing is, I'll tell you, you said it's kind of a silly looking fly. However, if you give it one strip, it'll make a little bit of a pop. And if you pause and give it another strip, it'll make another pop and like kind of swim like a topwater bug. If you give it numerous strips, it'll actually get under the surface and dive. And what's key, this cavity right here usually leaves a good like bubble on the surface, which I really like. I like that bubble gets created. And because this cavity here, it traps air, so when it gets pulled, it leaves a bubble behind. And again, the whole idea here is kind of the shape of the foam. You can customize it however you want, as far as whether you want legs on it. For my bait fish ones, I generally put like a marabou tail or just a straight piece of white bucktail in the back with some flash. Again, really, really fast, easy tie. That's I found really, really effective. So
just two feathers.
What was that?
2 feathers for legs. That's it, not 4.
I probably would do 4, but my patch is a little rough looking here, and I'm all out of my olive ones, and I wanted it to look at least somewhat congruent to a frog. So yeah, 4 would be better.
Is that foam dye available, or did you make that?
The punch?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's available through who does them? River Road or something like that.
Oh, really? What's it called?
Let me find it here.
What is the fly called?
The Stealth Bomber.
Stealth Bomber?
Yep. Yeah, River Road Creations. They make all the different types of punches.
Because if I don't show up with a box full of these, you're going to probably make me bring my own lunch.
Well, like I said, I do like them.
Cool.
It's good to have kind of an array of different things. It does something different than a popper or a diver, right? It
is a goofy looking thing. Was it you that posted a picture on your Facebook page of one of those things like half eaten after like 24 fish destroyed the shit?
Yeah. It was in rough shape.
I was trying to figure out what it really looked like once upon a time, and it was mangled.
Yeah, you would have had no idea, but yeah. So just kind of a fun one. River Road Creations is the people who make the punch. Like I said, you really, if you're crafty, you really don't need the punch. It's literally just a kind of a triangle shape at the front of a.
So no enhancements or anything. You haven't fiddled with it, put little dots on it to make it look more froggy. They don't seem.
You can certainly jazz it up. Like I said, I'm just kind of showing you the basic pattern here. I would add some probably black magic marker dots on it. Again, maybe some more feathers for legs in the back, or get creative with the legs you use. I know they make those like suede legs now. Those could be cool on the back of there.
Yes.
Right.
Who is that? Is that Pat Cohen makes them?
Cohen, yeah.
Those are cool.
Yep.
Would that change the swim?
I don't know. I've never tried it. It might be something real cool. I don't. Who knows? Okay.
So you fished this fly what, like 2 years maybe?
No, I've known of it longer than that.
Okay.
I kind of had forgotten about it a little bit after that guy had it, and he sent me one. I reached out to him like, "Can you send me a pattern of that? I just can't remember how that thing went." And so he sent me one, and I cut it all apart and figured it out.
What do you figure? That was like something from the 70s?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an old, like even trying to find a tying video online, there's like 2 of them, and they're old, and you can just tell that's not. I'm actually going to do a tying video for one of them.
That is
my drinking with scissors thing, because it's just a fun, effective pattern.
so while I'm being totally selfish, what else? Crease flies?
Yeah, have some crease flies. You know, some,
Fuck on Dahlberg divers or anything? I
yeah,
mean,
definitely some Dahlberg divers, some frog, you know, some swimming frogs, something like that.
what about that, oh, what is it? That Krebs popper?
Yep,
Froggy version?
yep.
Pretty durable.
Yeah, that STP frog. Have you seen that one?
No,
Uh,
you got one in a box?
I do. Give me 1 second.
Sorry, guys, I'm being a turd here.
Well, hey, Mark, as long as are you familiar with the Wisconsin River up there?
Yeah, I fish it a lot.
So when these banks are flooded, do we need to worry about quicksand and all that when you're wading those flooded shorelines?
No, most of the sand around here is hard packed.
Okay.
Yep.
You know
Yeah,
what
I mean, you know,
Kyle,
yeah.
a lot of people in your pictures were wading barefoot. Is it safe?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
I
look, it's just all sand underneath there, you know, like it's really pleasant wading.
An old beer bottle or something? I mean, you know, you guys are all about the beer.
Well, the glass has been banned since I think the 70s on the river, and it's they'll check your cooler for glass before they'll check your fishing license. Let's just put it that way.
That's cool.
It's
Good.
and it's like a $500 fine or something per piece of glass.
Good.
They don't mess around. They will literally give you
That's why when you
$500
have
fine.
gourmet lunch, you get a sandblasted PBR can.
That's right. Yeah, that's an expensive 6-pack of bottles. I tell you that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can see. Here's the STP frog.
Yeah.
Let me see if I'll switch cameras here.
Or just put it in the vise.
Yeah. So the STP frog, the River Road Creations also makes a punch for the STP frog. This is one I would definitely get the punch for. I like the size 6. It's the medium.
Oh yeah, that's been around a
You've seen
while.
this
That's 2
before.
pieces, right?
Yep, 2 foam pieces, super fast ties.
Fold over the bottom and
Yeah,
how's that fish? You no weight put on that. That's totally top water.
that's totally top water. I love this frog.
It gets mangled.
It gets mangled. I have a couple of them. I like to go kind of heavy on the rubber legs in the back.
I noticed
Oh,
red. Why? That's just like a little cider on there, the red thread.
I call it the hemorrhoidal frog.
There you go.
A little extra there for him. But yeah, it's I go a little heavy on the legs.
Yeah.
And for that reason, because I want that thing to sit, you know, in the water like a frog, right? And those heavy legs in the back will kind of help it sink down. So I go about maybe 6 to 8 legs in the back, and then I just knot them.
Now, when you fish that, you tie that with a loop knot, or you just clinch it on?
I usually just clinch this one on because I think the loop knot can get in the way a little bit on this. But I think there's a guy, I don't know if you're familiar with his tying videos, Sven Diesel.
No, I don't think I've seen him.
He's got an STP frog tying video. I think it's a pretty solid one.
Okay.
Yep. I recommended it to somebody else and they liked it.
So nothing has worked better than rubber legs for that then.
On this one, no. I think rubber legs are key here.
Okay. Well, that's got everything that you need. A white belly. It's got the green. It's got the movement.
Yep.
And the rubber weight in the back then will put it. I like that.
We got a brown one too.
Nice.
And they, like I said, they make different size punches. I think 6 is the way to go.
Right.
I've used the bigger one and it tends to kind of twirl in the wind a little bit.
Okay.
And I find the smaller one to be more effective anyways. So if I had to choose one of their punches, that would be the size 6.
So like when you fish your crease flies, do you ever make those like in froggy colors?
I make green ones, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't played around with like giving it legs or anything like that. But that gives me kind of a fun idea. So maybe there'll be a new
There you go.
froggy crease find.
The last time I fished with you, or one of the last times, I had made some crease flies that I had put rattles in, and you determined they were a little too heavy
Yep.
because they were small crease flies.
Yeah. I think.
What I did is I bought the biggest saltwater punch they had. I wonder
Mhm.
if I could try that.
Yeah, I think I use the saltwater, maybe like
Like a
one.
number 3, the big one.
I think I use a 1/0 for mine, but
Okay. And then the other thing, you didn't like the idea that what I did is I capped the front, right? You don't put a
right,
cap.
you want water to pass through that. Or yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely. That's key. But let's see what else. Some gurglers are always good.
Guys, tell your guys about, some of your trips. Is there still any openings for crash camp?
Crash camp is full. Yeah,
Well,
that's booked up solid. But the frogs and footballs, I do have some spots left. Because it's a new camp, I think, and I just put it up on the website just now. So you guys can go to blackearthangling.com and look under trips, and you'll find kind of all the details there.
But we just need to know what week Mark's going, so we don't go at that same time.
That's right. That's right.
it's all the same week, Bob, but the problem
Oh,
is if you go ahead of me or behind me, you won't have to be there when I'm there.
hey, Mark, the stealth bomber. I'm playing around with some foam stuff, and I found a pattern for that.
Okay,
So I'll send that to you.
perfect.
Yeah, I think there's one online where you can like print it out.
Right. So I'm gonna get a Cliff's big yellow box and I'm gonna fill it and bring it with me when I.
Nice.
And if we have a good time, I'll just leave it in your boat.
I'll gladly take that. But yeah,
Tell you what, guys, I have fished with Kyle and he puts together, the other thing that he does amazingly well is he's a really good cook. He learned a lot of tricks from Ben and probably from Hannah too, who taught him a few tricks. But I'll tell you what, you won't be hurting for things to eat if you hang out with this guy. I was down in the Bahamas with him and Ben a couple years ago, and I'll tell you what, we ate like kings. It was amazing. And Ben, who is from New York, is rather a unique character. Was out fishing with Kyle and I think Glenn too. And you guys were out screwing around fishing in some bay and some scuba divers came back. And Ben managed to talk this guy out of a red snapper for $20. And it was like as big as a turkey. And we ate.
it was huge.
It was amazing. It was incredible.
Oh,
He
yeah.
makes the best black beans I've ever had in my life.
Yeah,
So,
he does. He does make the best black beans. So yeah, Ben's my other guide for frogs and football. So he's along, and you get all the great.
you got a chance to, I haven't seen him in ages. I'd love to see him again. So
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, he's the other guide for frogs and footballs, and so you get all the great frog fishing, and then go back to the cottage on the river.
food, great
and
food,
we
great.
feed you some awesome food.
That's right.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested, let me know. Like I said, I do have a couple spots left. So,
Do-
Kyle, I
He
also
will-
notice you've got a trout camp,
yes, I do.
and that's booked solid for the first one, right?
Yeah, I think we may be looking for one. I opened up some more dates just recently because people were like, I had a bunch of demand. And so I opened up some more dates. And I think we need one more angler for that. I think it's the April. It's like it starts out, you get there on a Sunday afternoon, and then your guided days are Monday, Tuesday. So I think it's April 25th to the 27th.
And you're also going to do one in September.
Yeah, and yeah, usually I do. I guess I'm kind of, I haven't posted the dates yet on that one because I don't know.
Yeah, I
exactly.
noticed that. Yeah.
But it would be like at the end of September or maybe the first week of October, sometime in there. Kind of that the best part of that second half of driftless fishing. So yeah, we'll try to get one going there. I mean, usually we always do one. Just a matter of like getting the dates solidified during that time. So
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yep. And that's kind of the same sort of deal. Really awesome food, and we kind of fish different waters each day, and it's a good time.
It's a treat, as good as it gets.
I just saw that on the chat here, someone asked about kayak fishing the lower Wisconsin. Fishing. I mean, obviously, fishing out of a kayak with flag gear can be difficult. But it's if you bring some spin gear, it certainly is fishable. I'd highly recommend stopping on the sandbars and then fishing like the downriver side of the sandbars is usually the deep side. I always say if you are going to come up and go kayak fishing or anything like that on the lower Wisconsin, to shoot me a message before you come. I'll give you some tips and tricks and stuff to keep you safe, because people drown down there every year, and it doesn't look like a scary river, but it certainly has got some scary currents. So if you're going to come up and kayak,
Yeah, well, that's why I was asking. It's a Predator kayak. It's to sit on top. It's very stable.
Mhm.
But, I'm not standing while I'm casting. I would find a place to, bank along the shore and wade like you guys were doing. I just don't know how far up or down to go on the river.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
it's all it's all pretty fishy, to be honest with you, during the right time. You know what I mean? I think there's a section, I get, the kind of the further down you get, like towards the Mississippi, the more it becomes more islands and less, I would say, sandbars until you get late summer. And if we've had a late summer where we've had light rain, it's a really good place to check out because you'll have it to yourself. And the sandbars start to show up late in the summer, and the fishing gets good late in the summer on those lower sections. If you want to fish something that'll be a little more conducive anytime in the summer, I would say maybe in the Mauston area. So there's the Castle Rock flowage. Down from the Castle Rock flowage would be a decent paddle and fish.
okay.
You can put in at the dam. It's kind of a long straight section from there, and then you can take out at the Lemonware River.
Okay.
About halfway through the float, you'll start to get into more braided water and a lot more sandbars and stuff like that. I think that's a solid place for kayak fishing. It's not quite as big as the lower. Obviously, it's higher up on the river, and there's less, having to paddle from one side to the other, which can be quite the task sometimes. So,
Okay. Thanks.
yeah, you bet. Like I said, shoot me a message if you're coming up this way, and I can help put you in the right place. So,
Thank you.
So guys, any more questions for Kyle? We've kept him for quite a while. I'm surprised everybody's still awake. We usually fall asleep about 8:30.
Yeah, it's
Hey,
good stuff.
Kyle, you were talking about using a gurgler.
yeah, I would. Yeah, I was telling Mark to have some gurglers with too.
Did I write that down?
Yep, I like a gurgler. They're kind of one of those sneaky flies that, again, I don't see in many people's boxes, but boy,
Yeah,
because it does something just different than a popper, right? It doesn't make necessarily a big deep pop. It like makes a spray of water.
Yeah, I just tied up a bunch of them just to give it a try.
Yeah, I love them, especially on pressured waters. If you want to hit top water, and I don't know what it is, but I've caught some of the biggest bass on top with gurglers. I think it's because
What size do you use?
I have like a punch again, probably like I think I use probably like a size 2 saltwater
Size
hook.
2? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a big one.
Yeah, bigger for bass anyways.
Yeah.
The smaller ones are great too, especially for you catch panfish on them too.
so you throw that on a straight eye.
I use like a classic stainless steel saltwater hook. I like a little bit of a weighted hook. Because
Okay,
what I find is that it's supposed to skate across the surface, and if you get too light of a hook, it kind of wants to flip up on itself. So I find the stainless steel hook is kind of the perfect weight to kind of keep it. It kind of keeps the fly keeled.
right. Okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna be busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right, guys. Thanks for sticking
Thank you
around.
so much. It was an absolute
Good.
pleasure. Always great to see you. Looking forward to seeing you again this summer. So thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
Call this guy. He's amazing. He's the real deal.
Call me soon if you want to get over Bass. My schedule's pretty well buttoned up. I got
That's
a couple days, but
that's a
not
good
many.
problem to have.
It is, yeah.
Well, I will just say, see you soon. Take care. My best to Hannah, and thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank
Yeah.
you guys.
Kyle, thank you
care.
very much.
Thank you, Kyle.
Bye now.
Very
Thanks,
nice.
guys.
Bye, buddy.